Welcome to the latest episode of our podcast series for financial advisors. Today's episode is The Leap from Independent Broker-Dealer to RIA, Unpacking a $700 million to $1.7 billion growth story. It's a conversation with Scott Pinkerton, Senior Planner and Managing Partner of FourThought Private Wealth. I'm Mindy Diamond, and this is the Diamond Podcast for Financial Advisors. At Diamond Consultants, our mission is to help advisors live their best business life. We want every elite advisor to find exactly the right place for their business and their clients to thrive, whether it's at a wirehouse, a regional, boutique, or independent firm. As the industry's leading recruiters and consultants, we've transitioned more than $250 billion in assets under management in the past decade, and each year, 25% of transitioning advisors who manage $1 billion or more are our clients. If you'd like to talk, please feel free to give us a call at 908-879-1002. Are you a financial advisor who's curious about whether you're in the best place to serve clients, or if there might be a better way to optimize your business for the future? Should I Stay or Should I Go is a new book that serves as a self-guided journey, walking you through the key steps that Diamond Consultants takes with our advisor clients, whether considering change or not. Visit diamond-consultants.com/thebook to learn more. Independence comes in a variety of shapes and sizes, with varying levels of freedom and control that can serve just about any desire an advisor may have in building their business. Scott Pinkerton knew that firsthand, having joined his father's business in the 1980s at A.G. Edwards. While Covia's acquisition of the firm, which soon became Wells Fargo, opened the door for Pinkerton Private Wealth to join Wells' independent broker-dealer model, FiNet. The IBD model worked well for Scott and his team for decades, building the business to over $700 million in assets under management. Yet there came a point when Scott started to wonder, should we coast along and just stay comfortable, or should we challenge ourselves to beat the trends and go for it? It was then that it became clear that even though they were independent, they were still limited by the guardrails imposed by the IBD model. To be a true fiduciary and make untethered decisions about their business and how they served clients would mean taking the ultimate leap, launching their own independent RIA. And so they did. In 2020, FourThought Private Wealth launched, and 5 years later grew to managing over $1.7 billion in client assets. In this episode, Scott talks about that journey and his transition. He shares why they opted to leave Wells and launch an RIA firm and how that decision has impacted their business. Plus, he talks about their extraordinary growth and shares the why around the decision to sell equity to Focus Financial Partners in 2022. And Scott offers a detailed perspective on clients, their unique family office services, the realities of business ownership, and much more. It's a conversation I'm excited to dive into, so let's get to it. Scott, I'm really grateful for your time today. Thank you so much for joining me.
The pleasure is mine, Mindy. I've listened to your podcast, find it very informative, and I'm anxious to participate.
Oh, that's great. All right, let's jump in. A lot to unpack. So I want to start at the beginning where we always do. Can you just walk us through your background and what brought you to the world of wealth management?
Well, Mindy, that's my favorite subject. Me. It's like that Toby Keith song, right? My dad was a stockbroker. He started in Venice, Florida in 1968. My first job was mowing the yard at A.G. Edwards back in the day. I went to Wittenberg University in Springfield, Ohio. I had a lot of fun there, but went there so I could go to a more prestigious law school. The schools in Florida weren't that hot back then, so that was my path that I saw. My brother joined my father with A.G. Edwards. It was going okay. And they saw that when I took a job while I was studying to get my LSATs, I took a job with AT&T selling telephones, really excelled at it. And they lured me back to Venice back in 1987. And I started to work with my dad and my brother. We could talk about the perils of family partnerships and transitioning, but that's how I got started.
And then what brought you to having launched FourThought Private Wealth? And by the way, I would love to unpack a little bit about a family partnership because, as you know, that's a subject near and dear to my heart.
Oh, yeah. And I have gone in my latter part of my career, again, it's 35 plus years, I've become really passionate about working with family businesses. And there's a polarity there with families. You have the family brain and the business brain. And so we could talk all about that. But yeah, so my evolution was A.G. Edwards was a terrific firm. You probably remember the culture and the client first mentality. It was a real family atmosphere and just was very happy there. But at the time, too, when I first got started, the independent space wasn't really a thing. I always felt as if I had to confine myself and the way in which we consulted with our clients based on arbitrary rules and regulations that you just had to live with. And then you had branch structure, et cetera. But A.G. Edwards really did a good job of trying to minimize that for advisors. Then we had the famous Wachovia takeover after Ben Edwards retired, and that brought in a whole new regime. It also allowed us to go an independent channel. Within Wells Fargo and Wachovia, they had something called FINET. And how do you refer to FINET? Is that
That's right.
is
FINET
it
stands for Financial Network, and it's the independent broker-dealer arm of Wells Fargo.
right? And so how do you explain to people the difference between the independent arm versus being completely independent?
Sure. Well, because when you're under an independent broker-dealer like a Wells Fargo FINET, you are independent, but it's independent with guardrails where
Yeah,
you're limited by what the broker-dealer makes available to you. And it sounds like that's what started to make you chafe.
that's exactly right. So you got a taste. It's kind of like the first step in a relationship, and you got a taste of what it was like, but you weren't really there and you could see on the other side. And for us, it was really just the broker dealer part of it as opposed to being completely fiduciary. And this was in the mid teens, and people were becoming aware of what a fiduciary was and the differences. And also, the business has just changed so dramatically. I mean, when I started in 87, we were actually picking stocks and calling people and recommending stocks. And now we're family consultants and just a different skill set, a different focus, a different passion. And the good people at A.G. Edwards, especially, and at Wells Fargo, they had restrictions because of the broker dealer regulatory bodies that really couldn't allow you to get out of this very, very narrow lane. Like we were not even able to call ourselves financial planners. And so it's really weird that you can't present yourself as a financial planner when that's your core competency. So that was a big deal for us in the mid-teens as we were in this independent model where we had a taste of independence, but we weren't fully independent. And so in 2020, me and my partners decided that it was time. We changed locations, moved to downtown Venice, which was a big step for us, and started the process of evaluating different organizations to custody with and our tech stack and all of that rigmarole back in, and that's when we went independent.
Thank you for sharing that background. And there's a lot to unpack there and a lot I want to focus on. But let me just take a couple steps backwards and ask a couple questions first.
Sure.
First of all, tell us a little bit about the size of the business. How many clients you service, the average size of those clients, how much in assets you manage, just for perspective.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting, and I think your readers will like this, to see how we grew as we marched through this process. So when we were at FiNet, and memory serves me that we were about an $800 million firm. And actually, it's a little bit less than that. It was more closer to 700 million. And then we had assets that we were consulting on that weren't part of our A back in the day. And when we went independent, the first couple of years, we grew like crazy. And we went independent January 1st, 2020. So imagine you're in a small beach town and suddenly COVID hits.
Wow,
Your,
right.
your clients are transitioning and your team is just getting used to the technology. We're scattered. People are scared. So it was really a crazy time I'm so proud of our team. But we grew through that, which was pretty phenomenal. And I think it speaks to the place of the fiduciary model. We were the first one in town. Of course, we have pretty good market share in Venice. Our name has been around since '68 in the financial planning area. So when they saw us going independent, that just naturally attracted folks. So we actually grew through that. Right now, we're about $1.7 billion in assets. We've got 27 employees. Our practice, we focus on helping clients make better decisions with less stress. That's our kind of mantra. And in all of the different divisions of our practice, we help people think about their lives holistically, heart, spirit, mind, and body. Excuse me.
Wow.
It's like I say it 40 times a day and suddenly I
Yeah.
go blank on it. So that's the march and that's our size.
And how about average size of clients? High net worth, ultra high net worth?
Yeah, so we've got 3 divisions. We've got FourThought Private Wealth, which is your mass affluent and high net worth. And that's probably 60% of our business by a client contact, the number of clients. Our high net worth or ultra high net worth practice is obviously fewer clients, but it is more of the revenue. And then we've got an institutional arm where we work with some colleges and community foundations, and that's a smaller part of our practice.
Right. And is there a difference in terms of the services you offer the clients in each of those 3 constituencies?
Our signature services, we call it the signature team. We're lasered in on entrepreneurs who prioritize their families. So we've built out a full regimen of services, kind of family office services, but focusing on the emotional health of the family. And in fact, I'm actually writing a book called Slipstream, Family Wealth, Emotional Health. And the concept of Slipstream is, you know how when you have NASCAR or boats or bicycles traveling together, you can go further faster, traveling each other's slipstreams. That's a whole nother topic we could get into. And by the way, being independent as a fiduciary has allowed us to really pursue some fun stuff and talking about things that you would never be able to do in a broker-dealer model. And that was one of the primary motivations to do that. So
that's something I can't wait to hear about. And I want to get there. I definitely want to unpack that one. So first of all, thank you for sharing some transparency because it gives people perspective in terms of kind of the business and where you spend most of your time. So let me ask you a couple of questions. Your career trajectory, your trajectory in wealth management is interesting because you've walked many different paths and lived in many different models. First being in the big firm wirehouse world of Wells or A.G. Edwards, then in the IBD, independent broker dealer construct, we talked about Finet, and ultimately culminating in launching your own RIA, which you subsequently sold to Focus Financial Partners. So there's a lot to unpack there, and I want to talk about it. But walk us through first and foremost. So let's first talk about the jump from A.G. Edwards to which became Wells, and then the decision to slide into Finet. So I've had the privilege actually of interviewing many advisors who have slid, if you will, from the Wells Private Client Group into the independent broker dealer or Finet model. And the number one reason they give for the choice to do so is they wanted to be independent. And when they compared it to the notion of leaving Wells altogether and going to another model of independence, what won the day for staying within Wells was the notion of protecting the flank. Was that your motivation as well?
So if by protecting the flank means that when you switch firms, you don't have every advisor in the country calling your client saying, oh my gosh, were you still with those guys? That was a big part of it. And having protected my flank as a real mantra for the way I did it, I don't know the counter history to that. I don't know what would have happened had I not. The negative is that I had a friend, you may know, have heard of him, Marty Bicknell. He founded He and I were on a ski lift and when we were both with A.G. Edwards, and he was talking about this idea of independence. And I remember him going and calling him afterwards and saying, what do you miss? Or what are you going to miss? He goes, like, I'm going to miss the people. And I look back at his mission and I wonder, gosh, I mean, I'm certainly wouldn't have been interested in building a Mariner. And I'm really proud of Marty and think the world of him. But yeah, I wish I would have, in hindsight, just ripped the Band-Aid off. It might have been a step backwards, and it might have been more disruptive to my clients short term because they would have to make a decision. But in Wells Fargo was great. They honored everything. They said, hey, we're not going to go after your clients. And they didn't. And they were just very professional. I can't say enough about the people. But I think you start off with really doing some soul searching and doing your personal mission statement and understanding how you make decisions. So a lot of us in our businesses, real people pleasers. And I am, a son of divorced kids or divorced parents, I mean. And I just remember thinking about it as I went through that personal work about how I was the kid that was there trying to make everybody happy. And as I look back on it, I'm 62 now. When I was in my 30s and 40s, I was really concerned about that too. And I wish I would have just looked at what I could have become and what my ideal is and just say, hey, how do I get to that ideal? And not worried so much about it because clients come, clients go, and business is business. But the sooner you get on the right path, the better off you're going to be. My opinion.
Scott, actually, I appreciate your sharing that. There are a lot of advisors that grow up in the broker-dealer world and feel when they're lucky enough to work for a firm that has multiple affiliation options, that the easiest or safest or least risky thing to do is to protect the flank and slide into the independent model. And then say, I'm young, I've got 10, 20 years, I can go independent, full fiduciary down the line. You made a comment earlier that for you, going to FineNet was great because it was the first step in a relationship, if you will, but it wasn't complete fiduciary. And we hear that a lot. So we've interviewed advisors that are in the first step of that journey. They've gone into their firm's independent broker-dealer model as a first step. And many of them begin to feel as though they have either outgrown or are outgrowing the broker-dealer model. And you touched on it a little. And I made the comment that the reason they feel they outgrow it is because they feel limited by the broker-dealer. So talk to me about that, if you would. Tell me what you meant by it was only the first step in the relationship, and what were those limitations that you were experiencing in the FineNet world?
Yeah, so let me sidetrack just a second. You have to do personal work and understand who you are and what it is that's going to bring you true joy. Obviously, joy requires who or to, and no thing will bring you joy. But there are people, and this is not judging or looking up or down on anybody, but there are people that see this as a very quality of life, lifestyle kind of business. And you'll like to have protections. You like to know what's going on. And there's other people that this is an expression of who they are, that they're really ambitious and they want to leave the comfort and go into the chaos of the unknown. And they're comfortable with that chaos. And not everybody is. We hire advisors from trust departments and from broker dealers. And one of the hardest things for them to, when they go into the independent model, is when they come in and they say, well, what do we do about this? And I respond, well, what do you want to do? You got to invent it as you go. You got to paint the boat while you're sailing. And if that's not you, then just do the work to be aware of what your motivation is. And you can't just think about the money, because you're going to make a ton of money even if you stay as a traditional broker dealer and jump from firm to firm. That's probably the most financial rewarding in a lot of ways. But if you have a vision of, hey, I want to impact the world through my work and through my day-to-day endeavors, then you're going to be just, the number of paints on your palette will go up exponentially. So getting back to your question, I think the question was, looking back on it, would I have done it faster? Is that kind of the summary of the question?
That, but paint a picture of the specific limitations you felt. So I love your comment that part of it was soulful. You had a vision or a dream of building something bigger and different, and you went for it. And not everybody has that dream. Not everybody has the need to be fully independent. And so working under a broker-dealer umbrella is more than enough for them. It's independent enough. And that's a good thing. That's why Baskin Robbins makes 31 flavors of ice cream, because it's different things. My question is that I imagine that you went through the disruptive route of leaving the broker dealer world and building your own RIA because of pushes and pulls. The pulls was that soulful piece of wanting to do the more fun stuff, which is what I want to hear about. But there also had to be some pain points, some limitations you were feeling in the broker dealer world. So I want to first start with those and then get to the fun stuff.
So let me think about three things. I'm saying that to force myself to remember all three. One is something that I don't think advisors that don't have the decades of experience that I have, there was a period of time where the SEC was cracking down on large advisors. I think it was during the Obama administration, if I'm not mistaken. And I remember Merrill Lynch, and don't quote me on this because my memory isn't that great, but the gist of it was somebody, a large firm, I should say, fired an advisor because they somehow paid a dog walker for a client that was in Europe or something like that. Do you remember that story?
I do. And you hear stories like that all the time, by the way.
Good. And maybe you could speak to it because I just remember that. And I remember just thinking about, wow, what would happen if I, out of doing a service for my client, violated a firm policy and this business that I spent 25 years in growing is just taken away from me. And it was like, that can't stand. I've got to move for my own well-being and wealth and my family. I can't be in that situation. So that was an undercurrent that really spoke to me. And I can tell you another thing that happened. I remember in 2000, I had clients that were perfectly well positioned and the panic happened, the tech wreck happened, the market was down. And then you had 9/11, and that just completely unnerved people. And then after that, you're already down so much. And then you have Enron and MCI WorldCom and Tyco, and people just lost complete confidence, and you saw them panic. And it was heartbreaking. It's like being the best surgeon. You're doing everything you can, and then the patient is in the recovery room and they rip out their sutures. It's like, ah. And I said, there's got to be a better way that we can communicate so that people really understand what it is that we're doing. And so I came up with this observation. By the way, complete tangent. About the same time, Daniel Kahneman and Igor Tversky and others were coming up with this behavioral finance. And I went to the Duke University for their advanced studies of human behavior, something taught by that Dan Ariely, I think. But we were already seeing a lot of work being done on behavioral finance, things like confirmation bias and all those other things. And then also, by the way, I was going through deacon training at the Lutheran Church. And what hit me upside the head during that latter part of the deacon training was that there's so many of these truths that people recognize that are sound investment principles and they're sound as far as behavioral finance goes that are also kind of an ancient wisdom. So give me an example. The goose that lays the golden egg. It's an Aesop's fable, right? 1700 years old. And the idea is that if you structure a portfolio that you can live off the eggs, the golden eggs, don't eat the damn goose, right? And everybody acknowledges that. And it's somehow, if you can anchor that memory to a client when the going gets tough, as it did in 2008 and during COVID, all you got to say is, remember the goose that lays the golden egg. That's what we're doing with your portfolio. I know it's down 20, 30, 40%, but we don't care. We're focused on the dividends. And so being able to tell that story in a way that people understood, you're so hamstrung by what you can say and do and what you can put in writing on your website. And I think that's fine if you don't have that story to tell. But if you're passionate about it, you got to get into an avenue where your paintbrush is going to be accepted to the canvas, so to speak.
And why couldn't you have told? So I think there's real power in storytelling. I believe that completely. Why couldn't you tell your story the way you wanted to while at Wells?
Well, you could tell the story client to client, but let me give you another example. 2022, Hurricane Ian hits, and I'm in Venice, Florida, Southwest Florida. And my wife and I are blessed with 3 daughters. Two of them lived in the Richmond area at the time. We have a house in Richmond, or a little townhouse. And so she evacuated early, and we're managing through our clients and our team, making sure everyone's okay. I live on the Mayaca River, which is off the Charlotte Harbor near the Gulf of Mexico, I'll still say. Anyway, that night, the hurricane hit, it passed, but the river was starting to flood. And so I got in my 2013 Tundra and made my way out, and I drove to Richmond. So the next day, I'm keeping track with all my staff. The staff and the team was scattered. Clients were reporting back in. And it was imperative that we give the all clear to our clients, because our clients are around the world. One, they want to know their dear friends, the CSMs that they talk to, the advisors, that they want to know that everybody's okay, and they want to know their money's okay. And so I was able to, from my iPad in the kitchen counter, after driving all night, just do a quick report. It was like less than 3 minutes long. And it said, hey, we're good. Everyone's fine. Here's the number that you need to call. We're up and running in Atlanta, in Jacksonville, in Miami, in Charlotte, and I'm in Richmond. And I got it from recording to out the door to clients in 2.5 hours. That would have never happened if you had to go through all the compliance stuff, especially with a video.
So that I get. And I think that's what you're saying with the first example. It's not that you couldn't have told your story client to client individually, but if you wanted to write that story, or you wanted to publicize that story or speak it on social media, it would have had to go through 5 rounds of approval by compliance. It would have taken longer, and it may not have been exactly what you wanted. Is that, I imagine that's your point.
Yeah, by the time the news gets to print, it's already old news.
Yeah. And you also spoke to a topic we write about a lot, vulnerability. You talked about the fact that you heard the story of somebody being fired for dog walking. I don't remember the details of the story either, but there were a lot of nonsense stories out there. Advisors being made examples of and fired for what seems like either very silly reasons overall, or things that would have been just a nothing, not even a warning, years ago, are now grounds for termination. And that sense of vulnerability is a real motivation why a lot of people wind up leaving the broker-dealer world. So you are certainly not alone. But I want to talk to you then about the good stuff. You made the comment before that being a fiduciary has really allowed us to pursue some fun stuff. Like what? What's the fun stuff?
Well, I'll give you an example. A friend of mine who is an old college buddy and very successful business guy, years ago, maybe 20 years ago, my last name is Pinkerton. So if your last name is Pinkerton, you're going to have the nickname Pink at some point in your life, or Pinky. Yeah. So he sends me an email and says, hey, Pink, I'd like you to facilitate my family meeting. And he goes on to explain, the reason I want you to do it is because you won't let me push you around. You'll tell me when you think I'm wrong, but we want to run the meeting. And again, I'm in that space now where I'm functioning in behavioral finance and multi-generational thinking already. And it launched me into a genre that I just have become extremely passionate about, and that is multi-generational family planning. And so being able to look at that and say, well, what do we want to do? And we want to do a video. We want to do a website where we can have educational material. We want to have a certification. We want to have a book. There's limitations on what you should do from a business and compliance perspective and just good business practices, but you don't have to worry about, oh my gosh, I've got to go through 5 different rungs, and this person who's really a bureaucrat and they've got their own things that they've got to answer to is going to make a decision on my vision. If you ask Henry Ford, what Henry Ford said, if I would have asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. When you're a visionary, if that's your personality, you can't have a visionary and say, okay, you can only look through one eye, but you might not be a visionary. And so I don't want to force it down everybody, but
I was going to say that. I mean, the message here is that everyone should get to live their own best life. And for some, they don't need to be a visionary. That's not what they're shooting for. They want independence for different reasons than you did. Mm-hmm. It's enough just to have better take-home economics and go from being a W-2 to a 1099. They don't want more than that. And there is nothing wrong with that at all. Let's make that point. But I do want to ask you a question. Still, even though sliding into finance wasn't enough independence for you, it still had to be better than being a W-2 employee. What were some of the subtle positives of being independent with FineNet, something you couldn't have done as a W-2 employee?
Well, if you ever raised a kid or coached a basketball team or whatever it is, you start off with discipline, then you teach, then you coach, and then you mentor. And so when you are just in a traditional broker dealer relationship, you're basically in that discipline teach area all your life. And going that finite model was terrific. I have no regrets except for it took 10 years of my life, and it allowed me to take baby steps. So we weren't running our own financials and we weren't running our own compliance. We didn't manage our tech stack, but we certainly had a lot more say about our branding, our office space, how we went to the market. So it was a great first step and allowed us to get our toddler legs under us. And then when we went fully independent, we had more of a structure, not the structure we needed. And I can tell you that I don't know how you could prepare for it, but there's just a lot that comes with being independent, from managing your financials, getting insurance, and managing the employees, because we had folks that, bless their hearts, they had been 20, 30 years working with a big organization and they weren't motivated to look for that ideal self and journey into the chaos. They were like, hey, I've got 2 kids to support and bills to pay. I want to make sure that I'm taken care of. And how do you comfort them through that process? So managing the employees was took a lot of energy, and it was a lot harder than we expected. So, but it did give us some training wheels and allowed us to brand. And then with FineNet, and they were good to their word, is that we owned the book. And so then when we decided to go independent, they were completely professional about us, and we had really stage it, do our letter writing properly, and really work above board without having to be all this secretive stuff, so that our clients had a good transition.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Let me ask you one other question on the topic. You mentioned that you've grown from 700 million to about 1.7 billion since January of 2020, so 5 years. So congratulations on that. But you mentioned that being an RIA really had a lot to do with that growth. So I get that being able to write a book and being able to story tell the way you want to and less bogged down by compliance and less vulnerable certainly were positives. But what would you say are the 1 or 2 really tangible things that accounted for your growth that perhaps you wouldn't have had under the broker-dealer world?
Well, first of all, I took a risk on a piece of real estate. If I invite everybody to come to Venice, it's a beautiful community. And there was an opportunity to build something in our downtown area in a kind of a prestigious area for us and really brand it. And it was a financial risk that I was willing to take. And I'm in a partnership with the building. So having that downtown area that's looked the same for 50 plus years, and suddenly there's new construction that's architecturally welcoming, done by people that the community knows, that I think had a lot to do with it. And secondly, there's people out there that were waiting for a reputable fiduciary practice. And every day, especially in Florida, we have people moving down from New Jersey and New York. And more than ever, they're looking for fiduciaries. It's like our marketing just suddenly became more effective. We're able to say things like, everyone here is paid on a salary. And that just resonates with people. It just creates greater alignment. So I'm a big believer in the fiduciary model. I'm not saying that the broker-dealer model doesn't work for other people, but I just think it creates better alignment. So
And it enabled you to grow, and that's a wonderful thing as you've talked. So it took you some moves to get to this wonderful place where you are now. How did your clients react to those number of moves? The move when A.G. Edwards became Wells, sliding from Private Client Group into FineNet, move from FineNet to launch your RIA, selling the RIA to Focus.
Well, I think we can talk about the focus thing more. It was just small steps. So there was no disruption. The repapering of things that you have to do was really not that big of a deal when you go from broker dealer to FineNet. And they still see the Wells Fargo all over it. I was still in the same office. So that was not a big move. And then going from FineNet to Fidelity, the custody, that was a bigger deal. And we had
Mhm.
to be a lot more intentional about it. And we had a whole strategy and plan. Obviously, COVID threw us a curveball, but we had incredible retention. I mean, I'm thinking about less than 5 households didn't make the transition with us. And then I look at the Focus deal, and but this Focus is unique in that, and I know you've had Michael Nathanson on, and just recently, in fact, that we still own 60% of the economics of our practice. And we have a contract that basically says that we are in charge. And so the business will be and continues to be locally owned and operated, so to speak. But what we've done, one thing that you do find right away when you enter into a fiduciary practice like an RIA is, let's say you have a client, we have some Silicon Valley clients, for example. And so I'm not an expert in stock options and non-qualified stock options. Now, there are people that are in our practice now, but at the time I wasn't. And Wells Fargo had a team that would help us go through that calculation. And suddenly you don't have those people. So partnering with a firm like Focus gave us some of that heft and breadth. We have a legal team and other areas of specialization that you get with a large organization, but still having that independence. The RIA at least was great.
You're headed in the right direction, because that is where I wanted to pivot to next. The part of your journey, the decision 5 years after launching your RIA to sell a piece of it to Focus. So, for those listening not familiar, Focus Financial Partners is the largest investor in the independent space. It's essentially a private equity firm that's investing in independent businesses that still allow the independent business owner to really be independent, to control their destiny. And we're going to ask you about that in just a moment. If you're interested in learning more, Michael Nathanson, who is now the CEO of Focus, was on when years ago, in the first years of the show, when he was the CEO of the RIA he built called the Colony Group. And he has since succeeded Rudy Adolph, the original founder and CEO of Focus. He is now CEO, and we've had him on more recently, so you can learn more about it. But before I ask you about the decision why Focus, what went into the decision to, in fact, take on an investor and sell a minority portion of the business at that point?
Funny story. There was a guy, I don't have his permission to talk about the specifics. I just say that's a guy. So it narrows it down. And he was a finite person as well, and similar size practice. And I'm on a bike trip right after COVID, and we're in the San Juan Islands with this bike trip, and it's the first day, and there's a group of us gathered at the hotel, and I see him. I don't know him that well, but I had dinner with him one time, maybe 5 years earlier, and I see he's got a, what's the name of the firm? Cap Trust. He's got a Cap Trust sweater on, and I said, called his name out, and I said, "Wow, so tell me about it." And he goes, "Yeah." And we talked, and I said, "Well, give me the reason why you did it." And he said, "I won't get to give you the number, but I can give you XX number of reasons." And it blew my mind. I was like, "You mean your practice is worth XX?" And so then it's just, as I'm riding that bike, saying, "Hey, if I had a client named Scott and he came in to see me and he has Y number of assets and X percentage of it is wrapped up in his business, what would I advise him to do? And the market's at an all-time high, interest rates are low, valuations are high. I'd advise him at least to look at diversifying as well." So that was the primary thought at that time. And I was happy with being just completely independent, but I figured I owe it to myself, my family, and my team. One of the things that made a mistake was not hiring a professional. So this is not you haven't told me to talk about this, and I'm not getting paid extra, but you don't know what you don't know. And I remember, to tell you specifically, I got an offer from a firm for a certain part of our business, and let's just say it was X number of dollars. And then I hired a consultant like Diamond, and they helped me put together a presentation that really put our firm in a good light. And
Yeah.
it didn't disclose who we were, but people could probably figure it out. But it put us in a good light. And then it got people knowing that they weren't the only fish in the sea. But more importantly, we were able to really think about who we were and what we wanted to accomplish with the rest of our lives. And there's some great firms out there. So Marty and I obviously connected. And the Mariner model is, boy, they can, if you want to grow your business, they can grow it fast. But you're going to fit into their model, which is, if I was looking at just monetizing and hanging up the stirrups, that would have been a great path. And some friends of mine did that. They're really happy. That wasn't where I wanted to go. I wanted to retain control. And Rudy said one thing to me. He says, I never want to make an entrepreneur an employee. And that really resonated with me. But I could tell you, I went back to that same firm after they had given me an offer maybe 6 months ago. They came in with a sharpen the pencils offer after being able to see all the data. And it was literally $10 million more. So I hear people saying, I'm not going to hire somebody to help us through this process. I just say, you're out of your mind.
Right. Right. Well, first of all, a lot to unpack there, but I will say you're preaching to the choir, because what professional representation allows you, what you're saying is a couple of things, or all the things we would say. One, it allows you to remain arm's length, to remain the good guy and hire a bad cop. It allows you to maintain your confidentiality and discretion. What you're also saying is it created competition in the marketplace, and competition is always good for leverage and driving price.
Amen.
And it made sure that you were laser focused in an efficient way on identifying the right firms to potentially acquire you, not just the highest bidder, but by laser focusing on what your goals were, it enabled you to find the right firms. So I want to just ask you a question. You said that, so one of your goals was about retaining control. So talk to us a little bit about what that means, the ability to retain control under the focus model. And as an investor, as the acquirer of your practice, what's the experience been like?
Yeah. So I was the last, maybe the second to the last. I say I, but it's really we, to go from Focus before they did their private equity deal. So they were a publicly traded company. And so I'm the last group before that. And the thing that we were careful about is that we did want to retain operational control. And I talked to other friends that were really, they hit their 60, 61 years old, and they wanted to go off and do something else. They wanted to exit stage right and let someone else take over the business. And the thing that they faced was there's nobody in their business that could possibly write the check and take the risk doing it. So having a partner come in to monetize it made sense to them. So that was true for us as well. But having that control, because really what inspires me, it's not the money at this stage. I wanted to focus on the next generation of forethoughters. And I wanted them to have the same great experience that my family experienced, which is you grow this business and you experience not only the emotional feelings of helping so many families, but you also benefit financially. And I just think that without a significant piece of the action, skin in the game, you're just going to attract a different type of advisor. You can attract an advisor that's more of a lifestyle. I'm looking for those people that really want to own their future. And there are definite paths forward now. I'm looking at how do I transition my interest in 60% of FourThought right now over to the next generation of forethoughters. And I tell you, it's just a fun journey to be on that path with a group of folks.
How about the way Focus valued you? Like in terms of structure, in terms of how did they, as an acquirer, their valuation of your business compared to what other acquirers may have offered you?
Yeah, so we ended up with one extreme, which one organization would buy 25%, and we would have kind of a consortium. Focus came in at 40. They were willing to do more. Another organization started off at 60 and wanted to go to 80, and a couple of others wanted to be just 100%. And clearly the 100%ers it was a bigger check. It was more, but it wasn't ridiculously more. It was, all were within 10%, give or take. Yeah, not quite all, but most were.
You hit on something. So a firm that wanted to buy 100% of you would have meant you would have given up 100% control.
Correct.
And one of the biggest things that that we hear from owners of independent firms grappling with the notion of, I'd love to diversify my wealth and I'd love to create opportunities for the next gen. And I would love to be able to make sure that I attract best talent and grow inorganically. And I've hit a ceiling and I can't do that on my own. So grappling, do I take on an investor or do I sell the business? But the biggest impediment or the biggest thing that keeps them from doing it is not wanting to lose control.
Mm.
How did you reconcile that?
Well, I specifically worked with someone like you to make sure that the contracts were such that I wouldn't lose control. So we have complete operational control. Now, that's not exactly true because we have to get a budget approved and we have to have compliance oversight to a certain extent. But yeah, I mean, and even after the private equity seat in our takeover, they've been very clear. And I know Michael Nathanson said this when you interviewed him, that firms like ours that join Focus to be that independent journey with our own vision of our own ideal, they're welcoming us to do that, and they're going to obviously bring opportunities for us to partner with the firm in areas that make sense for us to partner with them.
So I think the way Michael Nathanson put it also, and I appreciate hearing it from you, who's actually one of their partner firms, but the way he put it was that it's our job, or we view the value proposition is that they're going to go further faster with us. They will grow faster because they are a part of us. So yes, they're giving up 100% ownership, but what they gain far eclipses what they sell. Has that been your experience? Would you describe it that same way?
Yes. So far, so good.
That's awesome. And so you believe that Focus has allowed you to grow or do things that you couldn't have if you had not sold to them or sold a portion to them?
Well, the other thing that comes with independence is the self-actualization that you're not God. And it's like the first lesson in the book of Genesis, right? We can't control outcomes. And right away, what happened with Focus is there was a woman named Sukanya and Peter and some other folks that everybody would recognize that really provided solid, candid counsel and really professionalized us in a way that was helpful as a business. And it creates a more durable, logical, rational approach. So their coaching, we could always refuse their coaching and have, but that was there and it was prominent and it still continues to be. So that's that balance. And I know Nathanson and team are looking at the efficiencies of having all the organizations join a hub. And I guess one of the things that I think of is what happens if I'm going down this path and suddenly the team disintegrates or I die or whatever. There's a backstop for the client that says, hey, there is a large organization here that can step in if ever need be. But operationally, we still will always have the operational control. So I don't see them as buying us as much as we're a partner firm.
Right. And that allowed you to reach a lot of your goals, which was diversifying your wealth and retaining operational control at the same time. Okay. I want to pivot to a topic you brought up, the notion of family business.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned the term, and I said near and dear to my heart because I'm in a partnership with my family as well.
Mm-hmm.
But you mentioned the concept of family brain versus business brain. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, let's have another couple of hours, right? So there's Polaris, which we all know is the North Star. And I think it's really important for families to get together and identify their collective North Star. The wise men didn't go to touch the star. They all wanted to head in a direction. So I think a family needs to be thinking about big picture wise, not the color of each ship in the fleet, but the direction of the fleet and who you are as a family and what are you proud of, your history, and what do you want to bring forward. So there's some really fun work that can be done in that area. And then as you get into family conversations, one of the fascinating things about family businesses, and I know you and I are experiencing it, is we're really on the tip of the spear of emotional health because you have these complexities with your systems. Like, what's your favorite hobby, Mindy?
Don't love her.
So you have a golf group and it's a set of friends and you go out and sometimes you don't even keep score and you talk and you laugh, and you have another group where you're betting money, it's serious, and it's just a different human system, different objectives, different goals, different behaviors. Your business is a human system. Your family is a human system. Your place of worship is a human system. And what I observed, and I think I'm not alone in this, is that families have to manage two systems at the same time when you're in a family business. And so they've got to be keenly aware of the emotional health of the family as well as the business. So you have this tension that you can't solve. It's called, I talked about Polaris, you have these polarities where you have the family brain and the business brain. It's fascinating. And it gets to the work that we do with families nationwide, frankly. And with families, the first step you have to have is an agreed to North Star. We call it the Polaris, right? That's the name of the North Star. And it's you're heading in the same direction. But then underneath Polaris, you have all of these, what we call polarities. They're poles and they're tensions. And by the way, this is helpful not only with your family business, but with your family and with your business. There are certain issues that you solve and tensions that you manage. And so a tension that I have to manage in my business is we have a certain way that we do things, the FourThought way, and it's been successful. But we also have the desire and frankly, the ethical requirement that individual planners have their own flexibility within that. And so you're constantly managing how much autonomy do you give to your planners to present a plan and to present investments with making sure it's with the guardrails that you want to put in as a firm. So there's all of these tensions that you need to manage. And when you have a family involved, oh my gosh, talk about going from a 16-piece adolescent puzzle to a jigsaw puzzle that's hundreds and hundreds, and you can't even see the colors. It's just so difficult because now you've got to manage the hats that people are wearing. Am I wearing the son hat now? Am I wearing the dad hat now? How do I speak to this person? How's my voice? Do I hire my daughter who just lost her husband and has a special needs child when she's not the best fit? Do I pay her an appropriate salary? These are the things that families have got to wrestle with, and they've got to deal with pathways of communication, problem solving. And I just find the whole area fascinating.
I couldn't agree with you more. I love what you said about every decision we make. As our listeners know, I work with my husband, who is our COO, and my sons, who are leaders of the business, who are running the business along with me. And every decision we make, we start every conversation where there is a decision to be made. Are we making this decision with our business hat or our family hat? So I love your perspective and thank you for sharing it. I could talk for hours and hours, as you said, lots of talk just on the topic of running a family business. But I'd love to wrap by asking if there's any parting words of advice that you would have for our listeners who are considering change. And what I mean by that is what people who are considering change are worried about is one, disrupting momentum. Two, disrupting the status quo, like disrupting what's working, it's good enough. And three, worried about the risk of will my clients follow and do I have the appetite to do it and will the grass necessarily be greener? What would your advice be to those worried about those things but still considering change?
I would, reiterating some of the things I shared earlier, I would slow down and get silent and really think, meditate. We call it centering prayer in my faith, whatever you need to do. But what is your ideal? Don't worry about the chaos that's going to ensue. That's the fun stuff of life. Just worry about the ideal and then do some personal work about what it is that is holding you back. Who are you? What's your conflict? All of that stuff. And go towards that ideal. And it's not going to be the best. It's not going to be perfect. And you'll get thrown into chaos. You'll tumble and you'll get scar tissue and you'll wish you would have done this. And then you'll get silent in a year and a half and you'll brush yourself off and you look back to that ideal and you realize that you're not where you thought you'd be, but you've made progress, and you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again. And what happens is as you get to be 62, you look back on it, and you say, boy, I've made all these decisions. There was chaos, there was pain, there was tough, there was sleeplessness. But boy, we've come a long way. And as the closer you get to the ideal, the more impact you're having on not only on your loved ones, on the team, on your clients, your community. And that's a life well lived.
Love it. I think that's really good advice, and I find myself doing the same thing when faced with the decision as well, so thank you. Scott, it has been a real pleasure. You asked me offline when we started if it was okay to make this a little fun. I think it was. I hope that you had fun. I hope our listeners will have found this interview fun, and I wish you continued success and can't hear what you do in the next 5 years.
Thanks, and God bless, and look forward to talking again.
As a financial advisor, you hold yourself to the highest standards of integrity, honesty, and credibility. You are successful because you take your professional responsibilities seriously and are dedicated to your clients. But are you living your best business life? Are your goals aligned with your firm's, or could a better option exist? Should I Stay or Should I Go is a book written with you in mind. It's a self-guided journey that walks you through the key steps that we take with our advisor clients. This strategic thought process and roadmap to professional self-discovery is designed to help you ask the right questions and think critically and objectively, whether you're considering change or not. Learn how to get your copy at diamond-consultants.com/thebook.